Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel here today. And today, as you can see from the website on and the video title and everything, we have another ranking video going on. We're ranking every single Call of Duty in the series, worst or best to worst. One through I can't remember how many years are we at this point? Probably around 20 or something. Best to worst as what I think are the best and what I think are the worst video games overall. What I've taken into consideration for this, mainly the multiplayer. Now, some people might raise some eyebrows at that, but at the end of the day, COD is, was and still is a multiplayer, online first-person shooter game. That is his core like identity. That's his bread and butter. That's what it's known for. That's what it is, and that's the biggest factor. Stuff like zombies or spec ops, like additional game modes like that, will definitely be taken into consideration. Of course, not every COD has one of those, but for the ones that do, they'll definitely be taken into consideration, as well as, of course, the campaigns, if that COD has a campaign or not, will also be taken into consideration. But that's kind of the ranking of importance of the three main game mode sectors for COD. Multiplayer's at the top. In my opinion, that's the biggest kind of factor when it comes to ranking how great a COD game was. Then it moves on to zombies or spec ops. Then it moves on to the campaigns. Sometimes they can be interchangeable, or one, campaign's a little more important because the campaign was just that good. We'll get to that in a minute, but that's generally the consensus there. And of course, you have you have aliens or whatever for ghosts and stuff, so that type of stuff will be lumped in there. Warzone, which is obviously the kind of the battle royale, or Warzone, as well as what was the fucking? Why am I blanking on the name? Whatever the Call of Duty Blackout, yeah, Blackout. Those two battle royale game modes will also be taken into consideration, similarly to what a zombies and spec ops would be. So that's kind of the forefront here for how we're ranking these. And I'll just give a brief description on each game and why I think it's there. And I always want to preface this by saying, for the old heads here, my COD experience truly starts at COD 4, like a lot of other people's, I guess. I have played COD 3 and 2. I've played their campaigns and I've played their multiplayer after the fact, after they were at their prime. Have very little experience of COD 1 other than very occasionally playing some very old lobbies in some of the campaign. So just pretext there. Every other COD I at least have some prime experience in, particularly with the multiplayer, of course. But just wanted to preface that going into it here. Now, for number one, what I think the best COD is, or should I do it from worst to best? Is that more anticipating? No, I think we're just gonna, blow our load here. Oh, perfect. It got the right one. MW2. This is number one for me. This is what I think is personally the best Call of Duty game ever released, ever made here. It's fantastic. I could make an entire video dissecting this. You guys, obviously, if you've been following the channel here for a bit, you've seen some B-roll of MW2 from 2025. You know I still play this game on and off to this day since its release. Obviously played a lot back in its prime. It is fantastic. I'm trying to find some negative stuff, and there is some negative stuff in a way. Obviously, the noob tube kind of meta could potentially be annoying, especially if you were on the receiving end of it. So it wasn't without the, you know, it wasn't without its, blemishes, I guess. As well as Spec Ops. Although I enjoy Spec Ops, I'm not going to lie and say it's better than Zombies, especially some of the better Zombies games. But it is still fun. But yeah, MW2, Spec Ops is solid. It is a pretty interesting mission series, but that's a bit of a sideshow. The campaign is, in my opinion, the best COD campaign we've gotten to this point. It's just one. There's a reason that this specific campaign had been remastered. Like just the campaign, not even the game, not even the Spec Ops or anything. The campaign of this game was remastered, and it was for a reason. It's iconic. It has some of the most iconic scenes in video game history in it, particularly a very controversial one in No Russians, and the entire story unfolds incredibly well. It's interesting and fun to follow along with that. The campaigns and the missions themselves flow well, they play well, and it's enjoyable to go through those as well. And then on to the creme de la creme, uh, the multiplayer of this game. I still think not only does MW2 have the best campaign in the entire series, I think it has the best multiplayer we've ever seen in the series as well. And I don't think it's hyperbolic to say either of those statements. MW2's campaign multiplayer was fantastic. This was a point where COD had really came into its own after COD 4. There was a lot of people playing. The hype was unbelievable. The community was very active and engaged and large. It was incredible to be a part of it and experience that. If even after the fact, if you played later or you play now, even you still get a glimpse of that. It's a very it's a very down to earth. It's a very funny community. Obviously, it's gotten some flack over the years for its harshness, I guess, if you want to put it politely. But I think that only kind of added to the fun of the experience in my experience, anyways. I mean, the maps are legendary. What can you say about that? Stuff like Rust Terminal. I think those are probably the two most iconic maps on this game. Again, you could really pick any map out of this game, and it's iconic. But I'd definitely say those are probably the two most iconic. I mean, again, you have like high res. You have, I mean, there's a lot of things you can choose from here. But I think I mean, this has some of the most legendary maps in the Call of Duty franchise. Obviously, with them being remastered, there's a reason why. So yeah, MW2 is fantastic map design, fantastic flow with the games, and map design. I don't want to gloss over that for the games that do have good map design because, as you've seen in a lot of recent CODs, it's definitely gone downhill. That's probably one of the biggest complaints about BO6, which is a solid enough game. The map design, outside of a few, the really small apartment one that was meant for that specific game mode, and obviously they remastered Nuketown, which you can't really fuck up too bad, obviously. And they have some remastered maps in there. But a lot of their original maps, a lot of their unique maps to that game were pretty awful. So yeah, it definitely does make or break a multiplayer in a lot of different ways there. So don't want to gloss over the fact of how important that is. And then the gunplay was fantastic. I know I mentioned the noob tube meta that eventually kind of got itself into the main line, and it really still is. If you play it today, you'll see a lot of that as well. And it had some very, the shotguns were, especially the Kimbos and stuff were very difficult to deal with, especially in more close quarter maps where it's a lot more houses or a lot more storefronts. So it could be annoying, but essentially the game did a good job at gunplay. All the guns played well. There was not a set meta or hierarchy necessarily, especially not overall for every map and every scenario. Every gun was usable, every gun was feasible, every gun was overpowered, so no gun was overpowered. I think that's really, everything had its, counterbalances and, equals and opposites there. I think that's really how you should design most guns and most, I guess, heroes if you're trying to do that type of game. In most shooter games like this, make everything overpowered. So it was just it was perfect. I mean, as close to as perfect could get back in the day. And I know a lot of people like to say, oh, you're just looking at it through rose-eyed, rose-tinted goggles and the nostalgia brains on and everything. And that's definitely part of it. That's you can't remove that entirely from your decision-making process, but even for its faults, it still had a lot of charm, a lot of amazing, maps and gunplay, and the community was probably at its best it would ever get to in MW2. So that's why I think it's number one here. And hopefully, if I type this in, it'll come up for number two. There we are. Number two here. I'm gonna like it's going left to right in terms of best to worst there. It's BO2. Not exactly the most innovative or surprising list so far, as you can see here. A pretty standard list. Some people, the top three games here are very debated over as far as who's number one or who's number three here. It's most people have BO2 or MW2 as their favorite games of all time for good reason. They are both fantastic games, and they're both the two peaks of Call of Duty. I'd say pretty easily. BO2 was fantastic. Like Modern Warfare 2, it really didn't do anything poorly. The zombies, while I think was personally the weakest part of it, I think the campaign was excellent. Again, like Modern Warfare, it played well. The story was interesting. The maps or the different objectives and the different operations flowed well and played well. I think BO2, as far as zombies went, though, that was probably their weakest suit. The campaign again was great. It continued into a trilogy here that's really good, but the campaign but the zombies of BO2 was probably the lightest. It was probably the weakest of the original three Black Ops that we know and love: BO1, BO2, and BO3. The reason I think, the reason I think that, personally speaking, is because really Terminal was probably by far the weakest opening, like free map that we got. Terminal was not a particularly good opening or not a particularly good map in general. It had its bright spots though. Origins is obviously a legendary map. It's a very good zombies map. You had Buried, which is a controversial one, but I always quite enjoyed Buried. You have the fucking Alcatraz with Mob of the Dead or something. I can't remember the exact name, but Alcatraz, which was very good as well. So, and of course they had some remastered maps from BO1, of course, and World of War, as you do. But BO2 Zombies, I think, was the weakest of the original three Black Ops zombies. I think it was better than World at Wars, if you're talking original zombies, but that was a very bare bones zombies, if you remember back to World at War. Um, but yeah, I think of the original three Black Ops as the weakest one, but it's still very good zombies. That helps it be number two, in my opinion. Very good campaign, not quite as good as MW2, but I think it's a very good campaign on its own and continuing a very good story and kind of overall legacy of Black Ops, similar to Modern Warfare 2. And then again, the big, bread and butter of Call of Duty, the multiplayer. The multiplayer was fantastic. The multiplayer was fantastic. The maps, again, some of the more iconic maps. Obviously, you have Nuketown and stuff like that. That's remastered from BO1. But I mean, you have Firing Range, you have Nuketown, you have. I was gonna say like Raid for some reason, but I guess it's pretty iconic. But it is what it is. You have what is it, Standoff or Stanford, the one where you're in like that town with the middle house and the gas station area and stuff. I can't remember. You have a lot of iconic maps in BO2. The map design and the map, flow was incredible. Definitely a top three, I'd say, personally speaking. I think BO1 also had some really good maps. I think, BO2, MW2, MW3, COD 4 are really your top maps and designs. But I think a lot of the earlier ones had good map design. The gunplay, again, not quite as strong, I think, as MW2's, but I think it was still very good. It was still very good. Not necessarily the same thing where everything's overpowered, so nothing's overpowered, and that you can use every single weapon for really most maps and scenarios. But it was still very balanced. You still had a very large, I guess, entourage and variety of what you could use and bring to different scenarios. It flowed very well. The community was very good. The community at this point was, again, maybe the biggest or one of the biggest communities in Call of Duty history. Not quite as, I guess, rambunctious as some of the earlier games in MW2, if that's a pro or con, depending on how you look at it. It was great. It was a great time. It was a great game. It had its blemishes as well, I guess, kind of like Modern Warfare 2, but maybe not as extreme as the Noob Tube. But camping was a bit more prevalent in this game than it had been in a lot of other games. People like the Black X Worm, shout out to that guy, really OG YouTuber there, come to mind for stuff like that. So there was definitely some weird metas there and some annoying camping going on, but that's really the only blemish I had for it. Some amazing trick shots and snipers like MW2 with the intervention. This had the ballista, a pretty equally famous and iconic rifle when it comes to snipers. Yeah, it was great. A lot of good, big COD YouTubers really blew up or got their start here, just like MW2. MW2, you have Trickshotters really got their start here by and large. A lot of famous ones. FaZe really took off in MW2 with the intervention, of course. Yeah, that's, I think, number 2 right there. We have BO2. Number 3, I think this is where it gets a lot more subjective and you can make an argument for a lot of different games. See if it comes up if I type this in. Nope. Call of Duty. Let's see if it comes up here. Here we are. COD 4, I think, is the third best Call of Duty of all time. Now, this was a hard selection to make compared, like, the top 5 is really good. The top 5 is really good games. You can make an argument for any of them to be 3 and any of them to be 5 or 4. But when it came down to it, I just kind of chose which games I had most fun with and ranked them in order as such. And that's why COD 4, in my opinion, got the nod for number 3 over the next 2 games that are going to be debuting here. It was fantastic. Like we've said for a lot of other things, it has, an amazing campaign. The campaign in this is lovely, as are most of the Modern Warfare campaigns. They really do a pretty good job in most of them to make them a very interesting, good campaign. But COD 4 really, first of all, started it off, but it was also a very good campaign. The multiplayer was the first really modern and like polished current modern COD that you'd like go back to and play and you wouldn't have any like, oh wow, this is a very old video game. You could definitely tell some dating, but it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that this thing was somewhat modern. COD 4, this is where the series kind of blew up. Obviously, there's 3 games that happened before it, in the series, in the chronological order, anyways, of COD 1, 2, 3, and 4. Obviously, you had a lot of games coming out. There was games that came out before this, as I believe I was trying to remember if I get my release dates mixed up sometimes. I couldn't remember if I think World at War was the one after this, but this was the 4th game in the series, and this is where COD blew up. This is where COD came onto the scene, and in a way, it's almost like COD 1 in that it ushered Call of Duty into the modern era and into relevance and into kind of the keen of the FPS genre that it would, really keep in most regards. I guess to this day, if you really want to get like that with it. The multiplayer is fantastic. The map design is legendary. Some of the most iconic Call of Duty maps are from COD 4. A lot of them have been remastered in old and modern Warfares. It's iconic. It plays somewhat similarly to MW2. Obviously, that's a game that directly sequeled it in the Modern Warfare franchise, not necessarily in the COD franchise, but it's fantastic. The gunplay was great. Again, this is where it blew up. This is where COD got its start. This is where a lot of big COD guys got their start. This is where a lot of fans, including myself, really started playing Call of Duty, and it's a fantastic game. The campaign again was fantastic in its own right, and that's kind of why I ushered this in. It wasn't the first COD, it wasn't the first Zombies, it wasn't the best Zombies, but it wasn't the best campaign, it wasn't the best multiplayer, but it was what ushered COD into its dominance. It was a very, very good multiplayer campaign, though. Had a lot of fun with it. The community was great. That's why COD 4 is here. Sorry for the cut there, but yeah, COD 4, best third best Call of Duty in my opinion ever made. Great game, iconic COD. What ushered COD into the dominant spot of FPS online shooters. What got a lot of people to start. Definitely recommend going to check that out. Not sure what the 2025 player base is like, but if it is, I think it's worth it to go check it out just because seeing a different era of COD and seeing what really brought COD to the forefront here. So yeah, moving on to number 4 here. Oh, kind of spoiled it. Here we are. Call of Duty Black Ops, BO1 as it is, or just Black Ops, whatever you want to call it. There's a Half-Life Black Ops? Huh, did not know that. Regardless, 4th spot for me is Call of Duty Black Ops, and this was very close to being my third best one. These are very interchangeable games in my opinion. I would, it's honestly the main reasons I had more fun with COD 4, and I thought the COD 4 multiplayer was a bit better in both the gunplay and the map design. That's why I gave COD 4 the nod. But I will say, I think BO1 better and more iconic campaign. I think better sideshow attraction game mode, and the probably the best zombies of the BO, the Call of Duty Black Ops original 3 era. Some of the most iconic maps, and really took World at War zombies, which introduced the genre obviously, and just took it to a whole new level. It polished it beyond belief, and it made it into what everybody knows and loves today, in my opinion. Some of the most iconic and best game modes. So excellent best zombies I think I've in the entire series, not even just the original Black Ops series, but the best Black Ops period, or the best Black Ops zombies period. Probably the best Black Ops campaign, second best campaign overall in the series, if I had to say that. That's why I got 4. I think what it really falls short compared to COD 4 and some of these other games is in its multiplayer, which is why it got bumped down to 4 for me. Not to say that the gunplay wasn't great. The gunplay was pretty good, and the guns were pretty iconic. It had a very unique kind of class management system with the purchasing and everything. It was a pretty unique spin and take on that they hadn't really um, done before there. So that was interesting, but it was the guns were great. I think there is some problems in that there was definitely more of a meta in BO1. Some guns like the sniper rifle play compared to BO2 and MW2 is pretty lackluster. Same with like the LMG. Like there's certain classes of guns and certain guns you really just didn't use, and I don't want to say couldn't, but like you'd be at somewhat of a disadvantage in most regards if you did choose to use them. Beyond that, I mean the map design was pretty iconic. I mean, again, you have Nuketown come here, which apart from Rust and like Terminal, probably the most iconic probably the most iconic map in the game, maybe the most iconic map in the game. Firing range or shooting range, I can't remember what it's called. You have some really iconic maps come out of this game, but you also have some maps that feel pretty big, aren't necessarily the most well received. It's a bit of a mixed bag. It's like really good or kind of average, honestly, for some reason in BO1. But yeah, overall, pretty good game. Again, can't say enough good things about the campaign and the zombies. I think it's the best zombies. I think it's the best Black Ops campaign. And I think it's, probably the second, maybe the third best COD multiplayer when it comes to Black Ops. And definitely in top 5 when it comes to the overall COD, multiplayers for sure. That's why I gave it the 4th spot. Next, like I said, the top for 3 to 5 are pretty interchangeable as far as it's more of a bit of subjective take. So let's see if I can find number 5 here. Yes, here we are. What rounds out the top row here, and number 5 is Call of Duty Black Ops 3. It's fantastic. This game got somewhat of a bit of a flack, and we'll get into why here in a minute, and it's somewhat deserved. But I just want to say this COD BO3, especially looking back on it compared to a lot of the games that came after it, we really didn't know what the fuck we had here. This game was very good. This game was, in my opinion, the last great COD. What I mean by that is after BO3, there's some good COD games. Like there's some solid games that came out, and like Warzone came out, which was really big for them. But this was like the last true kind of, I guess, if you want to be dramatic about it, say old school or like traditional COD. Not even traditional with the with the movement system, obviously, but like the last old era COD, the last really great, true like pinnacle of COD, black or COD game. I think it was BO3. I think this series went downhill from here in most regards. The campaign, obviously, nothing to write home about. That had some knocks against it when put in at number 5. Similarly, the multiplayer, the movement system at the moment was pretty poorly received, especially with what preceded it, or was with its sequels. People didn't like Infinite Warfare. People didn't like the new movement system, but it would never get back to the original movement system really in the same way, in my opinion. But BO3, It was great. I think the zombies in this rivals BO1 for the best zombie spot. This is number 2. This is the second best zombies in my opinion. And you can make an argument that BO3 was better than BO1, or that I think the better argument to make is if you're gonna have pick one Black Ops to play zombies from, pick Black Ops 3. And that's because you can get the older zombies on that game, like remastered and brought up the BO3 graphics. That's the main reason. Of course, those aren't necessarily their maps, so do you count them? Not really, in my opinion. But even their original maps, I mean, they're opening, they're opening like free game, their free map. Quite the trick, about the 180 from Terminal in BO2 with Shadow of Evil. I think probably the second best opening map in BO in COD Black Ops history. A fantastic map in its own right. One of the better zombies maps just in general, honestly. Not even talking about opening like free maps. I mean, you have Dries and Draka, you have some really unique abilities. This is when COD Zombies kind of gets very experimental, gets very new. You have, of course, Origin did it with the staffs and everything like that, but you have stuff like that. You have the gobble guns coming to this game. You have a lot of unique stuff coming to this game, which made it really interesting. This was a terrific Zombies. That really brought it up to, secured its spot in the top 5 for me for sure. Not in the multiplayer. Again, the movement system was kind of weirdly received by some people, but I think it did it better than most other, future COD games would. I think despite the transition to Advanced Warfare, no pun intended with the game title and everything, and the, exosuits and everything, it did it pretty well. The gunplay was really good. The map design and a lot of them, some of them remakes, of course, and everything, but even the unique maps and game modes and gunplay, I think they were really good. I think it flowed really well. And a big theme here, BO3, of course, had some of the most infamous and like really pushed upon microtransactions and loot boxes, even more so than Advanced Warfare. The game, after a certain point, I believe about after halfway through its lifespan, it started getting a little pay to win, which was a bit of a disappointment. Before then, it was really just cosmetics as well as melee weapons. You were getting a lot of these crates and stuff, and it's like, okay, who cares? They look really cool or whatever, but they don't really necessarily change anything. But then the game started to get a bit pay to win with some of the games. Not every gun was viable. It was a bit of a meta, a far cry from a game like MW2's gun balance. It was a bit of a problem. So that, in a lot of regards, kind of brought it down to number 5 for me. But it is still terrific multiplayer. It's still a terrific game in the multiplayer and the zombies aspect. That's why I think it deserved number 5, and to be in the top 5 there. Moving on, outside of the top 5 now to number 6. We have, try to get the right one here. Here we are. MW3. Maybe a bit of a controversial. I don't know what other people really say about this entirety of the COD franchise. Maybe a bit of a controversial take here. I don't think MW3 was nearly as good as COD 4 or MW2. I'll just get that out of the way right now. I think really they had a better like Spec Ops like sideshow game mode than both of them. I think that's what maybe the MW3 kind of one up them on. They had some more unique game modes, like they had Infected and everything, which was kind of cool as well. So they did some stuff a little better than MW2 or COD COD 4 in that regard with the sideshow, with the Spec Ops and the additional game modes and such. And of course, being the third installment in Modern Warfare and being a later game, it had some more maps to draw on to remake and remaster and such. So it had pretty good and pretty iconic maps and flow with that. But the gunplay didn't seem quite as fluid, didn't seem quite as good as MW2's. It seemed like in most regards, campaign, multiplayer, which are the two big things in the Modern Warfare like early franchise, it was a bit of a step back and it's like take MW2 and make everything a bit worse, and then make the Spec Ops a bit better. That's kind of MW3 there. That's why I think it's deserving a lower spot than COD 4 and MW2, and why I think it really doesn't compete with the original trilogy of COD Black Ops, the first 1 through 3 there. But it's in its own regard still quite a respectable game. Moving on, this is where we start to get really kind of dicey and kind of weird here. Number, what is 5, 6, 7? I think it's Advanced Warfare. I think this game was somewhat deservedly hated on a little bit, but I think a little overhated on. Yes, the zombies wasn't some like amazing thing. It was kind of weird how they implemented that. The campaign I think was really good. I really enjoy. I mean, obviously it's got a pretty famous actor in it, so that kind of helps a little bit maybe. But I think the COD campaign in Advanced Warfare was really interesting, really fun to follow. I think it had a really strong campaign, so that helps out a lot of my books. And the multiplayer I didn't think was bad. Again, obviously this is what issue or ushered in this kind of Advanced Warfare exosuit bullshit that a lot of people in COD did not care for whatsoever, even before BO3, obviously. And it also ushered in the loot boxes and a little bit of pay to win, later on in its lifespan, or the 1 year life cycle, of course. Those are the big blemishes against it. That's a lot of the reason a lot of people hate it. But I think the campaign was really good, and I think the multiplayer, especially before the original loot boxes came into the game and it got a little pay to win eventually. I think Jesus, it flowed very well. I think this is still a COD that had pretty good, and for this game particularly, very unique map design and how it flowed with the new, exosuit movement. I think the map design and the gunplay were pretty good. I thought it was an interesting new take on the series. I thought the campaign was good, and that's why I gave it the number 7 spot. But I understand that people have this lower for the movement into futuristic warfare and loot boxes that people really didn't care for. Next, what do we have? 5, 6, 7, 8. Number 8 in the series here. COD 2. Now, I know at the beginning of the video I said I didn't have much experience of CODs 1 through 3. And that is true. But I have played COD 2 after the fact, and fairly quickly after the fact as far as like time-wise goes, and I still played it pretty recently actually. And somehow got into the lobby with a few people. Still holds up pretty well, fairly playable if you can actually find the lobby. The multiplayer was pretty simple, but it was pretty good, especially for the time period and being the second COD ever made. It was set in a very iconic war and time frame, obviously, like the first 3 in World War and everything. So that's pretty cool. I think the time period is pretty cool. I think the multiplayer flowed and played pretty well. I think it was a big improvement from what I've seen of COD 1, both I guess visually and how the game was kind of polished. The campaign was also terrific. I think when you're talking about World War II campaigns, COD 2 has the best campaign of a COD set in World War II. The D-Day landing and mission was pretty good. Obviously, maybe not as cinematic or polished as World War II would later be, but I mean that's just a limitation of time, of course. But I think the campaign overall was probably better. That's a big reason why I think the campaign for COD 2 is pretty terrific. The multiplayer was also very, very respectable. I think this made great strides in every regard from COD 1 to really help the franchise grow. This is considered a pretty legendary COD, and that's why it's number 8. I considered putting it a little higher, maybe over Advanced Warfare, maybe even over MW3. This could be very interchangeable, if anything, on the second row here, but this is where I decided to put COD 2. Next up, after COD 2, we have let's make sure we actually get the right thing here. Here we are, Call of Duty Ghost. One of the most forgettable and one of the most somewhat overly hated CODs in the series for a few reasons. COD Ghost, obviously, it didn't follow the formula of having a zombies or a spec ops. It had aliens, its own unique kind of horde survival game mode. It's very similar to zombies, but with a very different coat of paint on it with the aliens theme, obviously, that people didn't really receive well. It really wasn't that great, but it wasn't awful either necessarily. The campaign was, whatever. It's just, a lot of people hated on it because it was a very forgettable COD. Apart from aliens, it didn't necessarily like I guess try to change or it didn't try to push the boundaries a lot of things. And then the multiplayer was just very like almost painfully average to below average. And you'll notice a trend here once we get past COD 2 that a lot of these games have some serious flaws with them, and that is for a reason. I think when you're talking about the first 5, 6, 7, 8 CODs here, these are really good CODs. Those are really good video games. After this, it gets a little hazy as far as you really have to pick out the bright spots of these games. And I think COD Ghost kind of flowed and played a lot better than people gave it credit for, but it just wasn't necessarily very familiar COD feel what a lot of people had. But I think in its own right, Call of Duty Ghost is a pretty average, pretty solid game. So that's why I decided to put it here, kind of like a halfway, because I don't think it deserves to be at the bottom of the list of a lot of these games. So I put it towards the top with a lot of the better games here. Next up, kind of rounding off the second row here at number 10, we have boom, Call of Duty. I know, as you've probably picked up on, and I've said, this is the COD I have the least amount of experience with, and that's why I kind of cautiously gave it this lower rating. But I didn't want to, again, I did not want to put this anywhere near the bottom of the list or mixed in with a lot of the games in Call of Duty history that I don't think are particularly good, which we will get to towards the bottom of this list, and even we're starting to get into now. Because COD started off what is the most legendary franchise in online shooter, like online first-person shooter video game history. Um, it's obviously set in World War II. It's pretty cool. It's the first game of a legendary series. I think you have to give it some slack and you have to give it some credit for being such the oldest game and the first game. And that's mainly why I put it here, kind of just to pay homage to the beginning of this legendary franchise here. And that's why I put it there. Next up, starting off the third row here at number 11. This was a pretty. These next three, I think, honestly, were pretty interchangeable as very average CODs here. Very solid games, but pretty average CODs. After COD 1, we have World at War. For somewhat. Oh, shit. These are not. Oh, God. Call of Duty. World at War. Here we are. Don't care about which one it is. So, yeah. Call of Duty World at War starts out the third row. I'm not hugely impressive. I don't think Call of Duty World at War was a fantastic video game. I think in most regards here, in every category, all multiplayer, campaign, zombies now, with the obviously onset of zombies in COD World at War, I think it was a lightweight at all of them compared to the first two rows that you see here. It was very bare bones. It felt very old, very sluggish. It didn't feel like it did much with the kind of innovating COD, like the innovating CODs didn't feel like it pushed the envelope much. Why I put it at 11 then is because it did introduce zombies, which is turned out to obviously to be one of the most legendary game modes in video game history, and what has put a lot of CODs on the map here, like BO1 and BO3 and such, and BO2 helped put them on the map. So you have to give it some respect to that. Similarly to how you have to give COD, the respect and pay homage to that being the first COD and starting everything off. You have to give World of War similar homage, and that's why I decided to kind of cluster these two together for zombies and starting out the series. That's kind of my reasoning for these two. But then again, I think it by far, especially the original four, if you're going to lump in World of War with the original three Black Ops, it has the weakest of the zombies by far. I know it has some pretty iconic maps that have been remastered a lot, and people don't even realize they're World of War maps, but are very good maps. The zombies maps were very good, but they were a lot better when they were remastered in the later CODs. And every other COD after this has added more of the zombies, has added more to the Call of Duty franchise in general, and has done. It was a very bare bones game mode that the other CODs really took and ran with. But I still wanted to pay some respect by not putting it down with the kind of scrubby Call of Duties that we're going to be getting into in a minute. Next up here, this is a bit of a, again, these next two are pretty interchangeable in my mind, but I think Infinite Warfare goes here. Hopefully, oh jeez, be nice if I could actually spell it right. I don't even, okay, it did come up. This was an interesting game. Where to even start? Again, people at this point had gotten very fed up with the very advanced movement or the futuristic movements and the exosuits that COD had been going to. You go in that direction with Advanced Warfare and BO3, and it kind of paid the price for that because people were kind of fed up with it at this point. That being said, I think the multiplayer was very unique, very interesting, but I just don't think, and the gunplay was okay. I thought the maps were okay. It was a very solid game overall. Nothing horribly wrong with it. I just think it was a little played out at that point. The community had started to wade off a bit, so that didn't help either with the community enjoyment. And the movement system wasn't quite as good as it felt in BO3 because they tried to kind of tinker it and change it, obviously, as you do from BO3 because you wanted your game to be unique, obviously. But yeah, not a great one. The zombies was interesting. I think compared to a lot of his later zombies and some of the newer games we're going to get into in a minute, it is better. The maps are better and it plays better than a lot of newer zombies games. But compared to some of the before mentioned CODs, I don't think it's particularly as good. The campaign was pretty interesting, actually. Not a bad campaign. That's part of the reason I decided to put it up here above some of these other games. Pretty interesting and pretty unique campaign. So it was pretty fun to play through, I think, and a pretty interesting storyline. So that's why I think COD Infinite Warfare gets placed here. And let's move on to, what is it, 5, 10, 12, 13 here, unlucky number. We're going to place COD 3. Oh, jeez. Okay, let's see if we can get this to pull up. Call of Duty 3. Here we are. Probably one of the worst cover. I think it's probably the worst cover art of any COD 2. So that's part of the reason why it's down here. I'm just joking. Well, am I? I don't know. But COD 3 was not a very great game. Compared to even the first 3 CODs, I think it had the worst multiplayer despite being the newest one. Obviously, the technology had advanced a little more than the other ones, so it had that advantage going for it. But I don't think the campaign or the multiplayer were as good as the first 2, and I think that's what kills it. Especially if you're being, this is your third crack at bat. You should be improving and innovating, and it really just didn't do that in a lot of ways. COD 2 is better in most regards, has a better campaign by far, and has a fairly reasonably, in most people's regards, better better multiplayer. Not great. Didn't do a lot to really push the envelope forward. Not like COD 2 or not like MW4 or COD 4 before or after it here. So again, not awful. It just didn't do much. It wasn't great compared to some of the recent games around it, but it wasn't as bad as some of the games we're going to get into pretty low on the list here. And next one here. See if it pulls up if we type in that. No. Just spoiled it. Hopefully it pulls up there. Call of Duty Black Ops 4. I think similar to COD 3 actually in a way, and why they're kind of similarly placed here, and why I think they're kind of interchangeable. You could probably argue pretty reasonably that COD 4 is better than Call of Duty 3, or BO4 is better than Call of Duty 3. But regardless, this is the list we're rolling with. COD 4, don't think it really was a great game. I think it was painfully average at best. It didn't innovate a ton from BO3. It still had, it was very similar to BO3, just worse in most ways. Its zombies wasn't as good. It's if I remember correctly, this is the COD that didn't have a campaign, I believe, one of them anyways. So maybe I'm just completely, because I don't. If it did have a campaign, I did not fucking play that. The multiplayer wasn't particularly innovative or really good. It didn't flow very well. It had the hero system from BO3, but it tried to kind of limit the futuristic warfare movement that COD 3 was kind of known for. Because people, at that point had a pretty sorry taste in their mouth from Advanced Warfare, Infinite Warfare, and BO3. So I tried to limit that somewhat, and it kind of just meshed weirdly. The maps weren't great, of course, apart from the remastered maps, so you can't fuck those up too bad. COD 4, not a very impressive COD, that's why I put it here. But I don't think it's the worst COD. I don't think it's even bottom 3 for me. It's better than a lot of CODs that would precede it. And that would, be its sequel, of course. Next up, finishing off the third row here and being a number 15, a top 15, which isn't saying much when it's COD because it's not like there's 100 of these or anything, at least not yet. Maybe in 100 years, with their release schedule. Next, we have Black Ops 6. Or wait, yeah, okay. Boom. This is going because again, this is very similar to a lot of these games. I don't think it deserves to be placed in like the bottom row here, like the bottom row and a half that we'll have. It's not one of the worst CODs, but there's a lot of problems with this game. I mean, I think this game is. I don't want to spoil some of the list, but you can probably narrow down what I'm honing in on here for some of the worst CODs. It's not as bad as this. It was actually fairly good compared to a lot of the bottom barrel CODs that we've been getting in the past years. So that's why I think it had a very positive reception, especially at the start. But this game died. Like, we're still in the COD BO6 lifespan. Nobody's talking about BO6. People are playing Warzone a little bit, nobody's talking about BO6 anymore, and that's a reason. People got tired very quickly because this isn't a particularly great game. I mean, it's solid, it's average, but it's not a fantastic game. Um, the campaign wasn't anything to write home about. It wasn't particularly great. The zombies, I mean, he was okay. The maps were okay, but it just, I don't know. It feels so much different from where it started or where from where the great cause were that it really just wasn't great. Um, the level, I don't know, how do I phrase this? The game design of the new kind of zombies is just very weird, at least to me, especially coming from the older games. It like the armor system, the sheer amount of zombie, it plays very differently, and it again, yeah, I know you have to change some stuff, but I'm not a huge fan of the zombies in this game either. Not a huge fan of the campaign. Again, the multiplayer was okay. It wasn't bad. It was actually kind of fun for a bit here. The mosh pit game mode with the small maps was actually pretty cool and pretty interesting. And Stakeout, I believe it is, was probably one of the best, if not the best map in BO6 before they remastered, Nuketown, of course, because that's iconic. So it had some good stuff. It wasn't bad. The game's gunplay wasn't awful either. I think some things could be cheesed, especially on the mosh pit game modes, like the shotguns and stuff per se. Um, for example, I mean, but I think overall it was pretty solid for the gunplay. Not nearly as good as some of the top CODs, but not terrible when you get down into these kind of more bottom barrel CODs. I think the really bad thing for BO6 though was the map design. I think that's what really killed it in a lot of regards. Again, apart from Mosh Pit and of course Nuketown when that got remastered and stuff, there wasn't really many good games on or good maps on this entire game. It was very frustrating to play a lot of these maps. Aside from those two, really, not sure what it's exactly like right now. I haven't played in about a couple of months at this point, but the map design was horrible. The gunplay wasn't as good as a lot of these other CODs. Wasn't a particularly great multi or campaign experience, or the zombies really wasn't anything to write home about either. That's why I put it at number 15 here. Starting off row 4, we're starting to get into some particularly lackluster games here. We have Modern Warfare. We gotta get the right one. Just the base remaster. I mean, part of the reason this MW or Modern Warfare 2, and Modern Warfare 3 remastered really pisses me off is because it besmirches whatever the fuck that term is, the good name of the original Modern Warfare, Modern Warfare 2, and Modern Warfare 3. Fantastic video games in their own right, and these fuckers try to, I guess, remake them or try to, pay homage to them or try to remaster them in some way. It doesn't work. Spoiler warning: you can probably, narrow down the contestants here for what are some of the worst games in COD, in my opinion. All of these make the cut for the bottom two rows here. Not particularly good games. Modern Warfare, I mean, its unique map design is pretty poor. The game's gunplay and movement were pretty poor as well. The campaign, I think, was the maybe one bright spot as far as this went. Campaign was pretty interesting. It was very, I guess, realistic, you could say, and a very unique spin on stuff, especially compared to some of the COD games that released before it. It was an interesting campaign. I think people enjoyed the campaign. It wasn't particularly long, but it doesn't need to be. I think campaign was one of the bright spots. I think the multiplayer was pretty poor. I think the only reason people remember this game fondly and like this game at all is because it introduced Warzone into the equation, and I took that in the equation as well, and I think that's why it's here and not towards the bottom, because it introduced Warzone and the campaign was pretty good, but the multiplayer and the actual COD, the bones of COD, which is multiplayer, it ranks pretty poorly in my opinion on that, and that's why it's here. Next up here, starting into the fourth row here, what do we got? Yes, Call of Duty World War II. Oh shit. Call of Duty World at War Zombie. Oh fuck, I was looking right at it. Call of Duty World War II. A bit of an interesting decision to put this down here for some people. Some people quite like this game. It went back to, I guess, the beginnings of COD with World War II and the movement system, which people liked. I think the multiplayer and the map design and the gunplay wasn't terrible. It was solid. It wasn't anything to write home about. wasn't particularly good compared to a lot of other CODs, but compared to what came before and after it and around it, it wasn't bad. It was maybe above average in that regard. It wasn't terrible. I think what really irks me about this game and what makes it put down here is the campaign. Not only is it not particularly good, even compared to a much older game in Call of Duty 2, when another similar World War II campaign, it changes history. It plays into not to get political here, but it plays into this very quote unquote woke idea of World War II and what people um, quote unquote thought they wanted anyways. Obviously, it changed a lot of history. It refused to include the Nazis and the swastika like COD 2 had done. Obviously, some with the similar World War II campaigns. I believe, if I remember, I didn't play it, but I believe if I remember correctly, this is the COD that had what was it? Was it a fucking black like female Nazi or something preposterous like that? That was like a soldier, like a somewhere in like the military organization of the Nazis, anyways. It just completely not only takes you out of it, but just kind of annoys you when you see that. Similar to something like a Battlefield 5, it really lost me at that, and I don't think it was a particularly good COD to begin with, so it didn't have a lot of points to lose for me, and that's why it's here. Next up, so hopefully, I feel like it'd show up with this, right? Here we are, yeah. Call of Duty Cold War. Again, a very forgettable. I talk about Ghost being forgettable. This is even more of a forgettable game, in my opinion. Tried to play, kind of play off of and remaster and pay homage to the original BO1 and Call of Duty Black Ops there, set in the Cold War, similar to Black Ops. I just don't think it was great. I think the zombie, compared to the games released before and after and like around it and everything, I think it wasn't that bad, and that's why it's not a bottom three game like we're about to get to in a second. But the multiplayer, the maps weren't amazing. The gunplay wasn't amazing. The zombies, I think, maybe was better than a few other zombies, but wasn't particularly anything great. The campaign wasn't as good as Black Ops One back in the day. It wasn't. I mean, I think there's a good argument to be made that is better than World War II, but I think World War II's multiplayer was actually pretty solid, despite my disliking of the game, especially the campaign. Cold War, just it's a very average game, even by modern standards. I don't particularly think it was great, and that's why I think is down here, but narrowly avoids the bottom three here. Now to get into the bottom three here, let's see if Modern Warfare 2. Oh shit. There we are. God, Modern Warfare 2, the new one, not the fucking best game of all time, but the new one, not great. Similar to Modern Warfare, and we'll see with Modern Warfare 3, these games weren't particularly good. Again, Modern Warfare 2 seemed like the main show was Warzone, and that's what they were putting most of their eggs into that basket, as opposed to multiplayer, which in my opinion is the bread and butter and the bones of any great Call of Duty game. The campaign again is pretty similar, is very cinematic, very cool and realistic. I think that's the best part of MW2 when you exclude Warzone was the campaign, but the multiplayer really just wasn't great. Very similar, as really all these games are very similar to each other in Modern Warfare 2, and Modern Warfare 3, in the 2020s and more, 2019 and more. But it just really wasn't great. It had a lot of the same problems Modern Warfare did. The campaign was good, but the multiplayer was pretty poor. Um, and most of the attention seemed focused on Warzone. I don't think it's as bad as these last two games, but I think it's one of the worst CODs we've seen. Next up here, we have it's a direct sequel in the new Modern Warfare 3. This game is very arguably the worst game COD has ever put out. It seemed more, again, it had the same problems MW2 had, not a good multiplayer. A campaign that in this case was passable, but really wasn't as good as the first Modern Warfare's. Modern Warfare 1 and 2 here in the new era. Wasn't as good of a campaign, wasn't as good of a multiplayer. Again, similarly, it seemed like Warzone was still the mainstay of COD in general, not even just these Modern Warfares at this point, but just COD in general at this point. And it seemed like Modern Warfare 3 was very rushed. It wasn't very expansive or innovative in any way. It seemed more like a DLC to Modern Warfare 2 than it did its own unique, like, standalone game. And it was also a bit of a surprise that came out, if I remember correctly. I believe they said they were going to, it's either at MW2 or at MW3, they said they were going to do longer game cycles, but then this comes out, so it was a bit of a surprise there. Just an overall, a very poor game. Not even by COD standards, just by most standards. It wasn't a particularly great game, and that's why it's here. For the last, if you know all of the Call of Duties, you know what this one will be, and I'm typing it, of course. Call of Duty Vanguard. Again, you can or very easily make an argument in my mind that Modern Warfare 3, the new one anyways, is the worst COD game we've seen. I think it's Vanguard personally. This game, talk about a lightweight at everything. I think this is one of the worst examples of everything COD is about. Take any of the game modes I've talked about. We've obviously said like Spec Ops Zombies, multiplayer campaign, Warzone, and stuff like that. Have been the main things we're considering here. Take anything, um, anything out of the barrel that I've been talking about here. Vanguard really does it kind of the worst. It has every problem that most COD games has. It doesn't really have any bright spots or um, really upsides to it, in my opinion. It's a bit of a lightweight in really every regards that you consider a Call of Duty game. The multiplayer, the maps are bad, the gunplay, the flow was bad. The community for this thing was dead. No community hype or involvement at all. Kind of like BO6 is now, honestly. Um, Campaign, bad marks for campaign, bad marks for multiplayer. This game was truly, in my opinion, the worst COD, and I think really the lowest COD has ever sunk, in my opinion. Really a dark day for any Call of Duty fan. Didn't had almost no hype around it in the community either. Not well received by critics or fans. I mean, this was just all around probably their worst attempt, worst at bat that I've seen from them, and hopefully ever will see from them. But yeah, that's why it's at the bottom for me. So yeah, this is the complete list ranking every COD from best to worst in my opinion here. All 5, 10, 15, 20, 21 of them at this point. This list will soon be outdated as, if you're watching this a few years in advance here, I'll be missing a few fucking games, as is the nature of COD. You know, 1 year on this earth, you're 1 year older, and there's another COD game that's come out, of course. But yeah, that's my rankings for every single COD game from best to worst. Let me know what you think. Let me know in the comments down below what you think, which ones you changed, what your top 3, top 5, bottom 3 are, what you thought of my list, what your list is, and anything else. Yeah, just comment down below. I'd love to hear from y'all. And yeah, that about concludes it. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did and you enjoyed this video on the channel, make sure you like and subscribe. Definitely helps out the channel. Definitely love the support I've been getting recently. I can't thank you guys enough for that. It definitely, it feels good to know that I'm at least informing or entertaining or performing a dialogue for some people, anyways. But yeah, appreciate that, and hope you all do well, and have a good day. And I'll see y'all in the next video here. Peace.